Test, test. All good. We're good? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Eugene's November 21st, 2025 program, the Pacific Coast Intermodal. Let me say that again. I'm going to get it right. Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Eugene's November 21st, 2025 program, the Pacific Coast Intermodal Port Project, its impact on the region and Eugene. My name is Thomas Hura. I serve as president of City Club, and I'm pleased to welcome you to another of the many forums we've held since 1990 in the name of our mission to build community vision through open inquiry. City Club is fortunate to be a trusted, open, and independent voice for Eugene area community members to be heard. And as a lifelong Eugenian, I dare say the community is fortunate to have the City Club and to hear from our program guests and questions from the audience, whether here in the beautiful Wow Hall, online, or over the radio. We believe these kinds of gatherings around critical community topics strengthen our understanding of one another and ultimately our ability to support the community building work in so many sectors of the Eugene region. In today's fractured information landscape, we want to be a space where you can participate in unearthing, disseminating, and sharing relevant information in conversation together. We would love for you to browse our past programs at cityclubofelugene.org or our YouTube or Facebook. Please consider becoming a member if you'd like to support our rigorous volunteer work as Oregon's only city club that meets weekly. There are many ways to partner with us, and I'd like to thank our Diamond community sponsors. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more info at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. Thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their generous support as well. If this is your first time at City Club or just your first time in a while, I want to extend a gracious welcome. It seems we have folks who drove out from the coast to be in downtown Eugene today for our program. We really appreciate that. A quick reminder, please silence all cell phones in the hall. And with that, I proudly turn the mic over to the coordinator of today's program and the immediate past president of City Club, Andrew Kallick.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're lucky today to have our friends from Coos County here to talk about the Pacific Coast Intermodal Port Project, which is a proposed container terminal on the port of Coos Bay. Container ships would dock and the cargo would be moved straight from ships to the Coos Bay rail line, where it would connect here in Eugene to the national rail network. I'll let them explain all about that, as well as the sort of past, present, and future of this project. And we have three folks who are going to be speaking with us today. First is Melissa Cribbins. She's the executive director of the PSIP project. She served on the Coos County Commission for 10 years and has degrees from Portland State University, Gonzaga Law School, and Coquille High School. Katty McEwen is also here. She is a former state legislator, former port commissioner in Coos Bay, and a transportation infrastructure aficionado. In fact, I had a very sort of esoteric question for Katty this week, and she answered it precisely and asked me about it after the show because it's sort of fun. And she'll be representing the private developer of the potential port project. And last but certainly not least, Jeff McGilvery. He is a 31-year member of UA Local 290, that's the plumbers and steam fitters, and has served the past 16 years as a business agent for the local. He's also the secretary-treasurer of the Lane, Coos, Curry, Douglas Building Trades and serves on the executive board of Lane County Central Labor Chapter AFL-CIO. Please join me in welcoming our panelists.
want me to just tell you next slide when we're ready? There we go. Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Melissa Cribbins. I'm the executive director of this project. And I have not been quite a lifelong member I have not been quite a lifelong Oregonian, but close. I spent a little bit of time in Washington getting my law degree and a little bit of time in Idaho working for the Forest Service. So it's a pleasure to be here. I spent some time living in Eugene, although I don't have a degree from U of O. My husband does. So I always like being back. And Caddy will go ahead and, Caddy and I are the only members of the project team that are here today. There's some other project team members' names on there, and their contact information will be at the end of the presentation in case you need to reach out to one of them. In 2022, the Oregon International Port of Coos Bay signed a partnership agreement with North Point Development from Kansas City, Missouri, to develop and operate the Pacific Coast Intermodal Port Project. It is a relationship that was sparked out of supply chain issues during COVID. We all remember the difficulty in getting things. Like, I hate to always use toilet paper as the example, but that's the one we all remember, right? All of a sudden, toilet paper was a precious commodity that none of us could find, and you were resorting to stealing it from your friends' bathrooms when you went over for a visit. So everyone realized at that point how fragile the supply chain truly was, and the fact that the West Coast actually could support and needed to support an additional port. In 2024, the port received several significant federal grants to go ahead and move the project forward, including the Chrissy Grant, which is for railroad design and planning, as well as the Infra Grant, which is for planning the terminal, and then the RCE Grant, which is the Rail Crossing Elimination Grant, which applies to Highway 38 that goes into Reedsport to avoid having bottlenecks there. As of 2025, the project is still in its early phases. We have signed 2 of the grant applications. It's been a little slower going than we would like. It is funny because a lot of people told me it's going to take a year to get those grants under contract, and I told them they were crazy. And we have 1 grant left to get under contract, and it's been just about exactly a year. So it turns out that I was overly optimistic, but that's been the story of my life. I think it's really helpful to see this slide because there's been so much about this project in the media for a while that I think people often forget where we're actually at in the project. Sorry, I might even move a little bit so you all can see it. So go ahead and move to the next one, Andrew. It's a project timeline. Oh, unfortunately, the curtain is covering it, but I can tell you we are there behind that curtain. That's the We Are Here slide. We are just starting design development. The RFPs are drafted, and they will be released. My projection right now is they're going out the first part of January of 2026. Thank you, Caddy. It needed that. The request for proposal for design and engineering will go out on the 1st of January, or right thereabouts of 2026. They will be open for 45 days. And then at that point, we will go under contract. Hopefully the contracting process will be quick, mid-February, and then the design will start for the terminal and the railroad improvements portion of the project. At that point, once they get to about 45% is when we can start NEPA, the NEPA process for the entire project. And hopefully I have some slides about it later, but as you can imagine, this project is connected. So the NEPA process will be held as one collective NEPA discussion. And we have to get to at least 45% design and engineering on the terminal as well as the railroad improvements before we can move forward with NEPA. And that's the part that everyone always, traditionally thinks about as community engagement, because that's where we're having all those community meetings, people are giving comments, and those comments are being taken down by the federal agencies. In the interim, we continue to give presentations like this just to help people know where we're at right now in the project. Next slide. So The PCIP would be the only inland freight exclusive gateway on the West Coast. This is truly a ship-to-rail project, so it wouldn't increase trucking. The benefits are that it reduces emissions due to a shorter ocean voyage and because of the shift directly to train. And it would create a new gateway for Asian import markets, and that's who the main conversations are going on with right now. Next slide. Is why Coos Bay. It's the largest deep draft port between San Francisco and Puget Sound, and the only one with both a railroad and available industrial land. It's only 6 miles from Coos Bay to open ocean, and the port is a natural deep draft port. The dredging that'll be required is relatively minimal as far as dredging goes. It has access directly to the Coos Bay rail line, and it avoids some of the bottlenecks that are already going on. And Coos Bay is traditionally a shipping port. Prior to the Spotted Owl listing, when timber was still in its heyday, Coos Bay handled 350 ship calls per year. Now that number is closer to 55. All right. What would a new container terminal look like? It would provide jobs, 2,600 estimated during construction, 2,500 long-term, up and down the length of the project, 7,000 indirect regional jobs. The community benefit would, of course, be increased tax revenue for these communities, counties, and schools, increased shipping capacity, and shorter trade routes from Asian ports. I did have to disappoint one of my children who thought it meant that he could go down there and pick up his things that are coming in, being shipped. I told him that no, he probably cannot just drive down there and pick up his items. But it would increase and improve shipping. All right, project readiness. The Port of Coos Bay has been operational since the 1800s. The port has been modified approximately 10 times through channel deepening. The latest deepening was in 1998 to an entrance depth of 47 feet and a channel depth of 37 feet from river miles 1 through 15. This project goes about to river mile 8. And historically, the dredge materials have been placed in the estuary to create lands for development. We often get questions about why the port is focused on economic development. It's actually because Oregon law designates the ports as being responsible for economic development. And so ORS 777 sets economic development as a goal of the state as well as of the ports. I think it's important to remember that just this is the history of where ports come from, and this is what ports do. They're supposed to ship things in and out, and it makes Oregon a stronger state, and it helps with our economy, which is something we are all conscious of right now as the legislature is looking at cuts, unfortunately, for the next biennium. So when I speak of the project being a connected action, you have to have the three-legged stool picture, so everybody can see it, but it does make it much easier to understand all the parts of it. We have the new container terminal, we have improvements to the railroad, and we have the channel modification. The channel modification has been under design since 2007, Caddy? I'm looking at Caddy because she was on the Port Commission at the time. It's been under design since 2007, so it's at about 95% design. The rest of the project is really at 10% or less. The railroad, of course, already exists, but it needs improvements in order to be able to handle the larger train volume. And so once the RFPs go out and we get at that increased design of about 40-45% for the entire thing, that's when the federal regulatory agencies can start considering the project as a whole for doing permitting. Until then, we really don't have any permitting process going on that people can engage in just because we're not at that phase yet. I'm handing off to Caddy here in a minute. I wanted to make sure I didn't go past my slides. channel modification, though. This is a channel widening to 450 feet. This is helpful to see because it can show you, this is the overall look of, if you're looking down, obviously, at the channel, this is what it looks like. And we would be bringing ships in. They would go either 5 or 8 miles upriver, and they can turn around at that point. The design calls for actually 2 separate turning basins because this project would also benefit Roseburg Forest Products, which is at River Mile 8. And then the dredge spoils would be disposed of, and the building would start of the rest of the project. And I will let Caddy take over on the container terminal. Yes. And I'm going to leave my laptop up here for you too, Caddy. Okay. I'm going to let you get up here first to make sure it doesn't go to sleep while you're walking.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. It's all yours.
Thank you. Wow, these tall people. Oh, stop. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I like this better anyway. I'm doing this. Okay. Because then I can walk around, right? So I wanted to point out a couple of things on this slide because I think it's interesting and important. But those of you who know Coos Bay, this is the channel, the lower part of the bay, and the highway bridge is right up here. So when you drive into Coos Bay, you cross this waterway right up here. And then there's a rail bridge that isn't germane to this project. So our project is going to be down in this area. Anybody remember the New Carissa? Right across the spit from the New Carissa is where this terminal will be built. Most people know the New Carissa as a landmark. That was quite a day. Uh-oh, this went dark. Okay, next slide. One more. The design of the terminal and the rail, of course, are really closely linked. It's okay. I can watch over here. It's all right. This will be a state-of-the-art terminal. We haven't built a new port in the United States in over 4 decades. It's been a very long time since the federal government's invested in a new port. And so that's why we are actually drawing a lot of interest right now and receiving some grants from the federal government to help us move this project along. And Melissa mentioned this will be direct ship to rail. We'll be the only one on the West Coast that's direct ship to rail. So we have some unique qualities. It'll be a 2-berth facility. So 2 ships could come in at a time. It will bring in not the gigantic container ships that you see on the news. Ours will be kind of the mid-level, the around 12 to 14,000, what they called 20-foot equivalent unit vessels. And that's how they measure the containers that sit on a vessel. So they're good sized, but they're not the really giant ones that are going to the really big ports. The terminal design will follow very green operating principles. When you build something from scratch, you can build in all of the new technology and the things that we want to do that make it energy efficient. Where old ports have to retrofit, we can do all this brand new, which is very helpful. And we will have to do some rail yard development, of course, to build the trains as the containers come off the vessels. So there will be about 7,500 feet of arrival and departure track, 8,300 feet of runaround track, 46,000 feet of storage track, and 35,000 feet of working track. And if you're a rail geek, that's really important. And if you're not, it probably doesn't mean a thing. Next slide. The container terminal and the rail yard, again, are at about 10% design, as Melissa explained, so I'm not going to go into that again. We have quite a ways to go on the design of the terminal itself. There will be wetland impacts that have to be mitigated, and our wonderful DSL director understands all about DSL and wetlands, so she has been involved in these conversations. We have to make sure there's significant electrical power, so we've already applied to Pacific Corps for a large load. It takes about 5 years to get that done, so that's part of what we need to do. course, stormwater management. There was a lot of shooting out on the North Spit. People go out and sight in their guns out there all the time. A lot of duck hunting and bird hunting's gone on out there. So lead removal will be part of what we need to do when we're working on the terminal site. Sand removal will be moved. A lot of sand's going to get moved, and the excess will be used for beneficial use. Some of it will end up on our beaches. Next slide. One more. And the rail improvements. This is what I probably know the most about. When I was on the Port Commission from 2004 to 2013, we had a catastrophic thing happen. When the economy was struggling and our short line was owned, it was Corp, the Central Oregon and Pacific Rail Line was owned by Rail America. Rail America was owned by a hedge fund. And our little rail line, it's 100 years old. My great-grandfather helped build the train station in Coos Bay. I have a photograph of him. They were bleeding money because the markets were terrible and the global economy was in a free fall. And Rail America needed, and Fortress needed cash. All call went out to their subsidiaries saying sell off assets. And they decided it was a really good idea to take our beautiful little 100-year-old rail line that was originally built to move coal, believe it or not. They were going to tear up the steel rail and sell it to China for scrap steel for $13 million. They embargoed our rail line in one day. Legally, you have to give 120 days notice. So it got people a little excited when they did that. And so our Port Commission, with our congressional delegation, our leadership in our state legislature, and our business people and our local electeds all came together, and we went to the Surface Transportation Board and invited them to force Rail America to sell us the rail line. It was a very bold move. It was a very David and Goliath move, and we were not confident that we would be successful, but we were. And the Surface Transportation Board awarded us the sale of the line, but we had to come up with $13 million, which was the cost of the scrap steel to make Rail America whole, which we did. So we had a Port Commission that owned a rail line. We hired an operator, got it open and operating, and kept moving cargo for our customers. And so there's a long history of this rail line and how important it is to the port. It was important that we did that, and we did it, and we were successful. And now it's time to rebuild it because it's 110 years old, and it needs a lot of work. And to increase traffic on it with state-of-the-art trains, it needs a lot of investment. We will replace about 110 miles of track with continuously welded rail. I'm going to go over here and move the curtain. There are 128 water crossings and 9 tunnels on this line that need work. That's part of what the investment will be. We will increase the clearance in the tunnels. We will upgrade sidings because they need to be longer for longer trains, so there'll be 10,000-foot sidings. We will construct new track from the main line to the North Spit. Oh, thank you so much. There will be quiet zone conversations. There will be grade separations where this rail line crosses Highway 38 and 126. So there'll be 2 for sure and maybe 3 grade separations that are a really important part of this conversation. And quiet zones in a number of areas. And I know quiet zones are something that you all talk about up here a lot because I've heard that conversation not only where I live but where you live. Next slide. This is just a map of the rail line. People get confused about this rail line. It does not go through Drain. It goes from Coos Bay up the coast to the Siuslaw River, follows the Siuslaw River into West Eugene. Because there's a rail line that goes through Drain and everybody thinks that's us. It's not. But we do have 9 tunnels you can see and some important water crossings, but this shows you how it runs. Next slide. Project development. Melissa touched on this, so I'm not going to take time to do that. NEPA will begin when we get the design work on the terminal and on the rail at about 40 to 45%. There is significant interest from Asian ocean carriers. Those conversations have been going on for a couple of years, if not longer. And we have interest that is verbalized. Our funding and financing, Melissa touched on a little bit. Right now, We had a $60 million commitment to our channel modification in 2007. A bill was passed by Senator Verger and Representative Roblin at the time. When we had another container terminal project in Coos Bay, it was AP Moeller Maersk. Then the global economy slowed down and they moved away from that project. But that project was quite a ways down the road. That's why we're a long ways down on the channel deepening project. And the state committed $60 million at that time. That is now being used to move this forward. And that stayed on the books for a lot of years, and those bonds have now been sold, and that is available for us to work on this project. We also have a commitment from the federal government. It's about a $54 million grant that Melissa mentioned, Chrissy and Infra for the terminal and for the rail. The money that we have in hand right now will allow us to get through the engineering and design work and through the permitting phase and to the part where construction will begin. So that money is in hand at this time. And we did receive in the last legislative session a $100 million commitment in Q11 bonds that will be used to actually dig the channel when it comes time to take the channel down 8 feet for the 8 miles that take us to the terminal and the turning basins. I think it's really important to note that there are a lot of caveats on that money. Q11 bonds can only be used for projects that involve things that the state owns, and the state owns the ground at the bottom of the channel. So we qualified for a Q11 bond. The Q11 bonds will, there's about $1 billion left of capacity, so we're not taking money from anybody else. Q11 bonds aren't used that often, so they do have capacity. And we have to have a permit in hand. We have to have demonstrated funding. We have to have everything in place before those bonds will be sold and we can use that money to dig the channel. I just want to assure people that none of that money will be spent unless this project is successful. And I think it's important that you all know that. Next slide, please. Next steps. As Melissa showed you, we're clear at the beginning of this. We have a long way to go. And a lot of the questions that people come up with for us are questions that are going to be answered once the engineering and design work starts to move forward, because we're really at the infant stage, unless you want to talk about the channel, and that's been under design for almost 20 years. So we're a long way down the road on that piece. But we are very interested in making sure that people have current information. You can, I'm just learning about QR codes, but I think if you want to, you can click on that QR code, or you can use the pcipproject.com newsletter. You can get current information as it comes out. The port is very good. Their comms director, his name is Matt Friesen, is very good at putting out new information on the newsletter every time we have something to report. And sometimes things go, the slowdown at the federal government slowed us down a little bit. Sometimes there's just not a lot to say. That's not redundant, but when new things come out, you will hear them if you want to sign up for the newsletter, or go to the port's website and sign up for the newsletter, which will keep you all up to speed on what's happening and what's the most current information. There another slide? Perfect. I'm going to turn this over to Jeff. I'm so glad he's here today to talk about this. There were project labor agreements signed on this project when it was first conceived. It's been almost 5 years now, 4 years for sure. This has been a long time coming already. It's a very long, complicated process. We've got a long way to go, but we care deeply about these project labor agreements, and Jeff's here to talk about the importance to the guys that build things in this state. Jeff McGilvery.
All right, thanks for having me here today. I will say I'm not the eloquent speaker that the other two are. I am a plumber. So yeah, really, you know, from day one, when this came up, North Point came to us, did a project labor agreement to ensure we have the best trained, skilled tradesmen on the job. And for me, why this job's so important, we've tried to get projects down in the South Coast for years. You know, myself working 16 plus years on that, and they haven't fit environmentally or for whatever reason. And you know, from governors to all the legislature keep telling us to bring a clean green project. So we have. And we have complete bipartisan support on this in DC and here, everywhere. So what it means, you know, not just for our members, but for Coos Bay, I get asked to do a lot of high school talks, go into high schools about careers and stuff. And you go to Coos Bay, and you can't really be honest with them because there's not much future there. There's no industry. They're decades and decades of job decline there. All their legacy industries are going away. The timber, the fishing, it's just been really terrible down there. This would give them opportunities, not for jobs. There's jobs there. You know, you can work at McDonald's or service industry type stuff, but that's not a career. And this is opportunities for careers down there. And training. We all have, you know, training centers down there in the area ready to go. You know, and you look at the 2,600 jobs, and that's a lot of construction jobs. And I know it's been said a lot that construction jobs are temporary. You know, I'm 32 years into my career as a construction, you know, working as a plumber. And that's what we do in construction. You work one job to the next. So you string a career together like that. And you know, in like 6 years, I get to retire. So at 58, so it's kind of a good thing. You know, this is going to reach out to small businesses, everything, that whole community. You look at the schools down there; they're underfunded. The medical system's underfunded. And in fact, my daughter, we recreate in Coos Bay a lot, riding ATVs in the dunes. She moved down there after getting through college and working at the hospital with the cuts there. She just moved last month to Texas to look for better opportunities. And that's not, so that makes it a little more personal to me, I guess, too, but it's a common theme down there. And South Coast has been looking for something, and I think this is the right project. I guess that would be about it for me, just urging people to move forward with this. And yeah, that's about all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll begin our Q&A quite soon. But first, a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station KLCC for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. In Eugene, they broadcast on 89.7 FM. For those listening at home or on your commute right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC. We are truly honored to have you. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived at klcc.org, as well as on our YouTube channel and the City Club of Eugene podcast. I encourage you to say hi to someone around you, and we'll have a short break before returning for questions.
Back to the City Club of Eugene's program on the Pacific Coast Intermodal Port Project in Coos Bay. This is our question and answer session. First question, Eric.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Eric Jura and I've been a City Club member for about 2 years. And thank you very much for a very informative program. As a fellow Oregonian, I can think of nothing better than for there to be 2,600 new jobs in Coos Bay. That would be great. However, I should, I guess, since I'm also a member of the Active Bethel Community Neighborhood Association, where there are train tracks, and there are other neighborhoods nearby and so forth, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there are a lot of people that live in those neighborhoods that are very concerned about them. I don't know how much they know about the project yet, but there's definitely a lot of concern. So I guess my question is in terms of your outreach and communication, which I think is key to this whole enterprise, especially community to community. What are your plans for, I don't know, addressing their fears? You know, how are you going to handle that?
Well, I'll start. Oh, dear. What did I do?
Keep going, Caddy.
Thank
We
you.
got you.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, thank you. Believe it or not, City Club was not the first engagement we had in Eugene. We came up and met with the Whitaker neighborhood in November, and we were honored and delighted to be invited and spent about an hour and a half speaking with a number of you. I know I'm seeing a bunch of familiar faces. And the information you received today is basically the same because not a lot has changed since we came up to meet with that out at the mission, which was fabulous, and I learned a lot about the mission. And so, yes, it's going to be critical. Once, as Melissa said, the engineering and design starts, NEPA starts, there will be a tremendous amount of community engagement all along the 3 counties that the rail line runs through. It's you all, which is very important because we know it will have an impact. It's Reedsport. It's Florence to some degree. It kind of comes by Florence, Mapleton, Reedsport, Lakeside. You know, there are communities all along the way, and we will be doing outreach to all of them when the time comes. We've done some. I've been doing this for about 4 years, and there have been literally, I don't know, hundreds of meetings during the last 4 years. And we will continue to do more, want to do more. We want to hear what you're concerned about. I'm going to let Melissa talk about the community engagement once NEPA starts, which is very different. So there'll be a couple of different paths about how this happens. You have our contact information too. So when questions pop up, please feel free to contact us. If you need an answer to something and it's technical, we'll let you know if we have one. If we don't, we can't. But don't be afraid to reach out and talk to us, talk to the folks at the port, talk to Melissa, Matt Friesen, myself. We want to be as available as we can possibly be.
And as Caddy, this really is the beginning of a conversation. It's not meant to be the end of it. This is not the only time you'll see us. We will be back over and over and over again. If I learned one thing during the time that I was a county commissioner, it's that people hear information in very different ways. That we can talk to all of you, and you will still go home and talk to one of your neighbors who will say they've never heard anything about this project. And so it's important that we're communicating often and in different ways, like with the newsletter. With coming up here, we are planning on some virtual forums, although there's definitely a contingent of people that don't like to communicate that way. And we are putting together the calendar for next year and what community engagement looks like. As Caddy mentioned, there will be the NEPA community engagement. That will look differently. I assume some of you have been to environmental impact study meetings, and those are usually done pretty formally with, a big group of people, and then there's testimony given. But we will also continue to have these sort of meetings, and meetings where we have experts in the different areas that are there, that will be done more as a informal town hall where you can walk around and just ask questions of the experts. So we're excited to be working on this process right now.
Thank you.
Joel Corin, City Club member. Before I ask my question, I'd appreciate it if when you give an acronym like NEPA, some of us don't know what that is. The question is, in this past week's Sunday Register Guard, there was a letter to the editor or an opinion piece with strong opposition to the port project. And you mentioned that you need a 10,000-foot side rail. Sounds like you're going to have 2-mile long trains. Even my shady math says that 10,000 feet is close to 2 miles. The question is, would you please summarize what some of the arguments are against the project?
Well, first of all, I think I'm going to jump out on a limb here and say, NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, is that true?
Policy Act.
Policy. You're the NEPA girl.
NEPA is simply, it's that overarching federal law that is required whenever you have a project that is going to be funded with public dollars and is going to potentially impact endangered species. So it's the National Environmental Policy Act. It requires federal agencies to really assess the project and the alternatives and decide what can be done to best protect endangered species. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will be the lead agency on this. There will be other cooperating agencies like the Federal Railroad Administration and the U.S. Department of Transportation. They will be the ones that will be leading the process, and they're very clear on that. They're the ones that lead the process. We do what they need and give them the information they need to make their decisions. And at some point, an environmental impact statement will be generated that will go out to the public to provide comments. Those are usually right around 1,000 pages. So they are substantial, and everybody gets a chance to look at them, and then they will hold a hearing and people can give comments about concerns they have about the environmental impact statement, whether they feel that there's another species that should have been studied that wasn't, or whether they feel like an environmental impact statement is too long and there should be Cliff's Notes for it, or at least a podcast where we can all listen to it. I would argue for that. And the agency will take all those comments, they will go back and consider them and decide if they're going to revise it or issue a final environmental impact statement. And that is really the process that we have to go through for the environmental permitting. There will be a state portion also where the state of Oregon, all the letter agencies will also be looking at the process and what's been decided, and they will decide if the federal decision is consistent with Oregon state law. So there's a lot of oversight that goes into the environmental permitting on these projects.
So thank you. She's way more well-versed on NEPA than I am. Back to the rail line. I want to clear up one thing. The 2-mile-long trains are not the way I understand that the normal terminal of this size moving this kind of container cargo will happen. They'll maybe a mile, but not 2 miles. And the reason, we have sightings on the rail line already. They're just shorter because the trains, when they were hauling coal and timber in the day, and when it was passenger rail that ended in the 50s, were shorter trains. These will be a little bit longer, so they have to extend the sightings that are already there. And they probably need a couple of more because there will be more train traffic. When you do a project like this, it's my experience as a legislator who did a lot of work on transportation, there's always concern when things change, and I understand that completely. I'm also do a lot of work with air traffic and rail and non-highway modes of transportation. So when change occurs, it can be a challenge. There will be more traffic on this line if we are successful. However, the rail will be rebuilt to make it more efficient. It will be safer, and that's the upside of an investment in an asset that moves cargo across this landscape that will have a local and regional and national impact. And there are people who are concerned about the increased traffic. So does that answer your question? Sure. Yeah. Is there something else I can?
Let's hear the next one, and I bet you'll get another chance.
Okay. Well, catch me after.
Charlie Quinn, City Club member since 2002. I have longingly looked at that train track and wanted to ride it. And I've always been told the tracks would need to be upgraded significantly before passengers were allowed. With this upgrading, is a tourist train to Coos Bay a possibility?
That's an awesome question. As one who stuck her neck out and had a lot of sleepless nights when we acquired the rail line as a port commission, that's been a huge question. So right now the line's 100 years old. As the port is an operator right now, they can get a permit to do an excursion, a one-time thing. We've done it a few times. The port has done that a few times. It is beautiful. If you can get on it, get on it. It is a remarkable opportunity to see a part of the state you don't see. But I'm going to tell you the reason that passenger rail stopped in the 50s is because the highway came in. And when you can drive to Eugene in 2 hours and 10 minutes and it takes 10 hours on the train to get here, people choose to drive. It's also a different level of rail maintenance. If you are providing any type of a passenger service, it's a different level of inspection, it's a more frequent inspection, and it's a way more expensive way to run a rail line. So passenger rail with this project is probably not realistic because it's still going to take longer to get here than it does to drive. But I think excursions are a great idea. I mean, we've already thought about take a couple of cars, go from Coos Bay to Reedsport to Florence and have one half painted green and yellow and the other half painted black and orange and have concessions on it and make it an evening ride up into the valley, spend the night, come back on a Sunday or bus people back or whatever. Those are all ideas that are out there, so you're on to something, but regular passenger service just doesn't work because it takes too long, it's too slow.
Next question.
I'm Linda Kelly, and I'm actually a volunteer with an organization called 350 Eugene. Our focus is on climate safety. So 10 years ago, there was a project proposed, an LNG terminal down in Coos Bay that did not end up going through. My memory with that was there was a lot of resistance from the fishermen, the oyster fishermen in particular, I believe tied to the dredging per se, not necessarily the LNG per se. So I'm wondering how this project will be different, as far as the interface with fishing. Is that still an issue? There was another piece that made that unsuccessful, and I believe it was tied to state legislation, perhaps focused on wetlands. I do not remember the details. But I'm curious to know how this would be different from that project. And is there any worry from my part that it would be a Trojan horse to then bring LNG back into that area, which would be
Actually,
not good?
I'll give you I'm going to turn this over to Melissa, but there was a bill passed in the 2004 session that prohibits this project from moving fossil fuel. Okay. Now, we're not talking about the LNG terminal. We're saying this project will not move. There won't be coal trains. There won't be fossil fuel moved. So that was written into legislation in a bill that passed recently.
Well, and the dredging that we're doing cannot be used for fossil fuel. Yeah. Okay. Which is important that people know that, because when the administration changed over, there was a permit filed to reopen Jordan Cove. Many people saw it. I got a call about it on a Sunday and was looking at it on the website. I'm just going to be very candid with all of you. I was looking at it on the website, and the person's name and phone number who filed it was on the application. So Monday morning, 8 o'clock, I called the phone number because I thought maybe I'll get his secretary or something, somebody who can tell me something. And the man who filed it answered. And I said, "Hi, I'm Melissa Cribbins. I'm with the Port of Coos Bay. I was calling about this permit that you filed to reopen the Jordan Cove application." And he said, "You're from where?" I said, "Well, I'm from Coos Bay," and I explained it all to him. Anyway, after a long conversation with him, what he told me basically was, with the change of administration, he just thought there was an opportunity to reopen a bunch of these LNG permits, and so he had filed reopeners on 5 or 7 of them, and had, didn't even know where any of these projects were. Okay. So I think things like that when that happens, we have people that do see opportunities like that, but they aren't necessarily backed. I asked him if he knew any of the owners of the project. He did not. He was just speculating. And I think, that's what we're seeing is people that are just being speculative and thinking maybe there's an opportunity. I was a county commissioner during the 10-year, the Jordan Cove permitting was closer to 14 years. I was there for 10 of it. The main concern from the oyster farmers was drilling a pipeline underneath the oyster beds. So it wasn't about dredging, it was about the directional boring under the oyster beds or perhaps even going through the oyster beds. The other thing that I think was really challenging locally was the fact that Jordan Cove was talking about doing eminent domain, using eminent domain. There is no eminent domain that will be used on this project. And that makes a huge difference. Nobody wants eminent domain to affect their property. And I think that was part of what caused the problems with Jordan Cove too.
And I chaired the Shellfish Task Force in the legislature for 18 months. So I learned a lot about oysters. And the oyster beds in Coos Bay are in the Upper Bay, and they're down in the area of South Slough. And the 8 miles, we already have a 14-mile federal channel that's 37 feet. This will take the lower 8 miles of it and go down 8 feet deeper. So it doesn't impact the upper part of the bay at all where the oyster beds are, and it certainly doesn't impact the South Slough estuary where the Qualman oyster beds are. So I don't think the oystermen are going to be particularly nervous about this.
And I don't need to worry about LNG coming in.
If you hear anything, please let me
Let
know.
us
But
know.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Margaret Steinbert. I'm the chair of the Whitaker Community Council. Thank you all for coming again. It was a pleasure to have you last time.
The food was so good at your last meeting, we figured we should come back.
Well, I'm going to guess this won't be the last
Chocolates.
time that I see you all either, so we do appreciate it. So my question is regarding community engagement. I understand that you don't have a lot that you can tell us about what's going to happen in Eugene, the Whitaker train song, Bethel Danabo, all of that. There's a lot of things that will come into play. For instance, the quiet zone, Union Pacific. What are they going to do with the rail yard? What I would like to know is and please correct me if I'm wrong, you all have hired some community engagement people. So is that correct? You hired a community engagement firm, basically?
We did.
Okay.
We did. We're at the phase right now where we're deciding if we are going to, continue that contract or roll it into these RFPs that are coming out in January.
What my question is that once you get to what the plans are for the Eugene area, are you going to continue? Right now, you're representing Coos Bay. Essentially, and what's happening there with the rail yard. Are you going to continue the same amount of participation once it gets to Eugene, and will you continue participating in the community engagement that you're doing now with Union Pacific, with the city of Eugene, and with yourselves, with what's happening here where we live right now?
Absolutely. I would expect you to see more of us, not less. And I don't know that it will necessarily be me. I think I'm too much of a lawyer to be fun sometimes when I speak at these things. I feel like I'm really precise. But we don't see, when you hire a community engagement firm, we don't expect them to be the ones that are in the community. As the people from the project, we still need to be in the community. We need to be the ones that are hearing the concerns and the thoughts and having these conversations. And I think one thing, Kat, is we've wanted to be really open to conversations. I always give my phone number out, happy to have conversations, hear people's concerns. That's why we're here.
Okay, and so what kind of time frame are we looking at before we actually can get any answers regarding what the plans are to happen here?
I think it's really going to be next summer before we have the level of detail that anybody's looking for. I talked about the schedule a little bit when I was talking, And some of it is, we're having the RFPs go out in January.
That's a request for proposal.
sorry.
Acronyms, Melissa.
We will be hiring engineering and design firms in mid-February. They will be under contract by, hopefully the end of February, maybe mid-March. They will start working on their engineering and designs. And then at that point, when we get to about 40%, which should be summer, those designs will go to the Army Corps of Engineers looking at as part of that process. And that's when I think we'll really have the level of detail that people are really wanting to hear.
Fantastic. So please schedule us in, pencil us in for another
Margaret,
meeting.
you're on the list.
In the Whitaker in the summer. Thank you very much.
Next question, thank you.
Hello, my name is Christian Mack. I'm not a part of this yet. Perhaps I will be. But I am specifically wanting to speak about the quiet zones. So rather than community engagement, the city of Eugene passed the Quiet Zones project in 2018. That's 7 years ago. So no progress has been made whatsoever, entirely on the backs of Union Pacific's lack of consideration, a lack of participation, coordination with the city. The city is going to fund it, right? So I consider it abusive, and it's absolutely noise pollution. We have our university, we have our downtown, we have our public parks, we have everything right through this. So you brought up David and Goliath earlier. So this is what we are. We're the David, and the Union Pacific is being the Goliath. And now the proposal is to increase the traffic, and I've heard none of you speak specifically to pressure Union Pacific to get our quiet zones built. Coming and talk to people in Whitaker is great. I'm 1.5 miles away. My earplugs fell out this morning, and the train woke me up at 5:11 a.m., right? Last week it woke me up 4 times. It's absurd, right? And so that's great.
You have a question here, I assume.
Yes, the question is, the amount of platitudes that we've heard, and get to the question, will you commit to pressuring Union Pacific to work with the city of Eugene to get our quiet zones built? Sure, right.
Yes, the answer is yes. I can't
Okay.
tell you with this project in Union Pacific, we are the David and they are still the Goliath. Whether it's the city of Eugene or our project, we're in the same position. But we will be working with them, happy to have conversations and pressure them. Yes, we need quiet zones, absolutely. I also, one thing I did not say that I should say, and again, this is going to get, as more detail comes out, this will become clearer. This project is bringing cargo in from Asia that is bound for the upper Midwest, Chicago.
Right.
So these trains will go up north and up the gorge.
Right.
And I didn't say that before, and I should have said that to make sure that the vast majority of this is not going to go through town, it's going to go north. But yes, the answer is yes. Happy to be an advocate for quiet zones, because you're not the only ones that are going to need them. They're going
Right.
to be needed other places as well.
Great, well, that's good to hear. Thank you.
I thought he was pretty much going to cover my question. So I basically follow social media for Nextdoor. I'm a content reviewer, so I read people's input all across Eugene, and a perennial topic is the, sometimes, as he mentioned, really loud coupling and uncoupling noise in the Union Pacific rail yard. And beyond Train Song, beyond Bethel, it is surprisingly carrying sound, where we hear people in the South Hills who are woken in the night by a really loud noise, sometimes a series of loud noises that are, what was that scary house shaking? So a quiet zone, as you've described it, the grades, so those seem to basically relate to transit of freight cars, but that process of rerouting in the train yard, that makes these really loud things that I don't think are covered under quiet zone, because the rail yard itself is not a quiet zone. It's this activity of coupling and uncoupling cars. And I also see neighbors who
Let's
and
talk about
wanting-
let's talk about the rail yards then.
Sorry?
Is that a question about the rail yards and noise in the rail yards?
Right, so I also see neighbors who are frustrated in contacting Union Pacific with their concerns. They go nowhere, they're never responded to. So I hope when you have these conversations with Union Pacific that can be fixed. And in these in these community discussions that you're doing, it would be super helpful to have somebody from Union Pacific along with you to address.
Agreed. I would love it if they would. Again, I cannot speak for Union Pacific.
Last one. Thomas, you got one from our online audience?
Indeed, from Marilyn Milne tuning in on YouTube. And she asked several minutes ago, so maybe some of it got covered, but what about the physical impacts of the project, such as changes to the shoreline and residents being unable to get across the tracks while all of the long trains go by? And what do the tribes say?
We are moving trains along that route now. They are not as long as the ones that we'll be moving with this project. That is true. And that's why we were, in this engineering and design work, there'll be a lot of attention to how we can mitigate that. Now, there are going to be places where trains are going to stop traffic for a bit, and some of it is going to be up along the Sayusla, where people have a right-of-way across the rail right-of-way where their home is. Those are going to become topics of conversation, certainly. In Reedsport and Veneta, where the two Oregon highways are impacted, is seriously a topic of conversation. There will be grade separations that are very large investments where you separate the highway from the rail that will have to happen. There may be others that will be discussed, but those are under consideration now. But as this engineering and design work moves forward, these are all the things that are going to get detailed, and the discussion will come to the fore about ways that you can mitigate it. Honestly, some of it won't be able to be mitigated. If you have a train going along a track that has a right-of-way across it, the train's going to have to go through. Our smaller communities, Lakeside, for example, there's a lot of conversation about what we do with Lakeside. And I know that those engineers and those designers are going to have to figure out a way that emergency vehicles can exit and enter Lakeside while a train is moving through Lakeside. These are all things that are going to come out with this engineering and design work that we have not begun yet. So if you have questions that are very specific to a certain area, those are the things that should come into this conversation about how we possibly can mitigate that. Some can be, some will not be. I just want to be straightforward with you that when you have a train that's moving along right away, there will be some disruption at times. Yes, ma'am.
And I want to make sure I answer. I want to make sure I answer the tribe piece. I was an attorney for 5 years before I ran for commissioner, and so I understand just how important sovereignty is and how important it is to. It's cutting in and out. It doesn't like me. No, it's okay. So I was an attorney for a tribe for 5 years before I ran for county commissioner. And so I know how important sovereignty is and how important it is for us to be consulting with the tribes. That process is multifaceted, of course. We have been, on a government-to-government basis from the port, we have been sending notices to the tribes, giving them updates on where the project is and how it's been going, offering to communicate with them in any way they wish. Some have taken us up on it, some have not. But we've been communicating with the 5 Western Oregon tribes, federally recognized tribes, on a regular basis. There is a separate process where the federal agencies will need to consult with the tribes separately because that's part of their obligation. But from our side, we have been talking to the tribes and giving them updates on a regular basis. For 4 years? Yes.
That's all the time we have for today. Please join me in thanking our panelists.
Jeff, you want to sing a song?
Thank you so much, Melissa Cribbins, Caddy McCowan, and Jeff McGillivray. This has been Caddy McEwen and Jeff McGillivray. This has been our November 21st, 2025 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. We will We will have next week off to observe the Thanksgiving holiday. We'll be back here next week. We'll be back here on Friday, December 5th at noon. That program is called The State of Healthcare in Oregon, Part 3, If Not Now, When? It's sure to be a great forum, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you all. Take care of yourselves and one another, and we'll see you next time at City Club.